Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Carmen Mazzara. I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We in the APSIA community are so excited to welcome all of you today, and especially our colleagues from the Peace Corps. We know what a tremendous experience Peace Corps is and what great prep it is for our graduate school programs in international affairs, policy, business, development, conflict resolution, policy, you name it, we've got it. And so many RPCVs are well prepared for it because of the experience that they have. We'll have a brief presentation from a number of the Peace Corps team talking about their experiences and myths and realities. And then we'll open the floor to you to make sure that you can get the most out of this session and get all those burning questions answered. This session is being recorded, so you'll be able to access it afterwards on the APSIA YouTube page. As we go through, if you have any technical issues or anything that you'd like to share directly with me, please feel free to send that in the chat. Otherwise, please post your questions that you have for everyone openly in the chat, and we will do our best to get all of that answered. And so now I'm delighted to turn the floor over to Anthony Abate to kick us off. Anthony, please.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Hello, everyone. Thanks for letting us join today to talk about Peace Corps. Today, we'll be joined by 4 of Peace Corps' senior recruiters scattered around the country. We'll be speaking about different professional development opportunities related to Peace Corps and some common myths and myths versus realities that you may have heard of Peace Corps, and we'll work to debunk those today and answer any questions that you may have about Peace Corps. We'll be joined by Thomas Padilla, senior recruiter based in Irvine, California, Rachel Sato, based in San Diego, California, George McCaffrey, based in Des Moines, Iowa, Kenyatta Spiller, based in Birmingham, Alabama. But first, we are honored to be joined by our Director of Recruitment at Peace Corps, Maria Elena Vivas House. So I will turn it over to you now, Maria Elena. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Carmen, for inviting us to present to this great group of people. APSIA is close to my heart. We've been collaborating for many, many years in different positions that I've held, most recently with the Payne Fellowship Program. And I used to conduct an info session at that. But now with the Peace Corps, we are back in service, and we just sent our first volunteers to Dominican Republic and Zambia, and we are waiting for 24 countries to be filled their classes and send them, and really, really excited to be telling you about the different opportunities that exist, and also to debunk myths about Peace Corps. And we have a great group of our recruiters that are spread out across the country. You please reach out to us after this session. We are looking forward to supporting you and your students. If you're an advisor, even if you're interested, we receive all kinds of volunteers and in different sectors. So we are open for business and look forward to receiving the applications that we are going to be sending the face of America overseas. And that's what excites me about being part of this project, is that we are all for world peace and friendship. That's our mission, and our mission is more important than ever now. So with that, I would like to pass it on to Thomas Padilla. Thomas.
Wonderful, Maria Elena. Thank you so much. I will share a screen right now. All right, perfect. Can you see it? Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us in this virtual space. My name is Thomas Padilla. I use he, él pronouns, and I work as a senior recruiter in Irvine, California. I actually had the honor and privilege to serve as a Peace Corps volunteer from 2017 to 2019 in the beautiful land of Zambia, and I served as an agriculture volunteer. Today, I will be presenting with three wonderful senior recruiters. We are incredibly excited to be here with you. We will be sharing valuable information about professional development opportunities that Peace Corps can offer. In addition, we will be talking about myths, realities. We're gonna share pictures from service, tell stories, and highlight how this job opened a lot of doors for us. Perfect. So before we start the presentation, I want you to know that you can sign up for more information using this QR code. We will be sending you information about job postings, application tips, virtual events, and more. Today's presentation will be divided into three parts. So in the first part, I will talk about Peace Corps, our mission, goals, and where we serve. In the second part, we will be debunking some myths and talking about realities related to the application process, related to service, graduate school benefits, and life after Peace Corps. All right, so let's get started. Peace Corps is a federal agency. Peace Corps was founded in 1961 by John F. Kennedy. So for 61 years, we have been promoting world peace and friendship through community-based development. We have three goals that we are constantly aiming to fulfill. The first one is to help the people of interested countries in meeting their need for trained individuals. The second goal, to help promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of the people served. And the third goal is to help promote a better understanding of other peoples on the part of Americans. And I do want to highlight the fact that Peace Corps is a job. This is not a study abroad program. This is not a gap year. This is not just a vacation. And I'm gonna say it again, Peace Corps is a job. All right, now I wanna talk about benefits during service. So once you become a Peace Corps volunteer, we would take care of you. So we would provide a living stipend, which will be provided in the local currency of your host country. Housing. So it really depends on the community, and also it depends on the host country. So for instance, in Zambia, my host family built a house for volunteers. So I had my own little brick house, but I know volunteers, for instance, in some countries in Latin America who had to share a house with their host families. So it really depends, it varies a lot. Medical and dental coverage, we would take care of every single medical bill. It's a very, very comprehensive medical insurance. Student loan deferment, you can actually defer your loans during service. Vacation time, volunteers get 48 days of vacation time, and of course, career skills and top-notch trainings. Indeed, I was able to represent Peace Corps Zambia in Senegal for 2 weeks. I attended a malaria workshop, and it was a phenomenal professional development opportunity. Now, benefits after service. So we have the readjustment allowance. So actually volunteers get approximately $10,000 right after completing service. Actually, I was able to use this money to move to California. I visited my family in Costa Rica when I finished my service. And with that money, I was able to move to California. So it was very, very helpful. Graduate school benefits. Actually, we have more than 200 programs available for returned Peace Corps volunteers. And actually, Rachel Sato is going to talk more about this later on. Professional development opportunities and professional networking and career services. I always like to say that Peace Corps is a very strong professional network, and I'm happy to say that they have become my extended family. Federal employment advantages, we provide NCE status, non-competitive eligibility, and I'm gonna talk about this pretty soon. Public service loan forgiveness and access to affordable health insurance 1 month after completing service. All right, so now I want to talk more about where we serve. So we actually serve in more than 60 countries, and we serve in 3 regions: Inter-America and Pacific region, Africa region, Europe, Mediterranean, and Asia region. Actually, well, as Maria Elena mentioned, volunteers have finally arrived in Zambia and the Dominican Republic for the first time since the agency's global evacuation of volunteers in March 2020. The agency will determine when conditions permit the return of volunteers to each individual post, and will continue to monitor and respond to changing circumstances after volunteers return to service. Peace Corps service will be different than in prior years. And I think it's really important to keep this in mind. And Peace Corps will include specific COVID-19 protocols that may evolve based on the conditions in each country. Wonderful. So I also want to talk about program area concentrations. As I mentioned, I was an agriculture volunteer in Zambia, but I also had the opportunity to do health work as well with the local community. So we have what we call primary projects. So we have 6 projects: agriculture, youth and development, education, environment, health, and community economic development. Just keep in mind that you're not going to be married to just one sector. I was an agriculture volunteer, but I ended up working with the local clinics. So we implemented HIV/AIDS and malaria prevention projects. So as you can see, sectors can overlap. Perfect. So I'm going to talk about federal employment. And here we have a myth and a reality about a Peace Corps. So myth, all Peace Corps volunteers go on to work for USAID, United States Agency of International Development. Reality, returned Peace Corps volunteers receive non-competitive eligibility for hiring at many federal agencies. So actually, NCE is a wonderful stepping stone into the federal government. Actually, a lot of RPCVs use this special hiring mechanism to get a federal job. Like me, for instance, I applied to this job when I was visiting my family in Costa Rica, and I feel incredibly grateful for having the opportunity to work as a public servant. To me, it's an honor, and I plan to continue my career in the federal sector. I also want to outline that you won't be entitled to a federal job after completing your service. So yes, you will have NCE for 1 year, but you still have to go through the application process, submit documents and such through Usajobs and other government platforms. Many RPCVs pursue careers in the international development sector, right? Like State Department, USAID, the Agriculture Foreign Service. Actually, a lot of colleagues from my intake are working for agencies like EPA, FEMA, USAID, State Department, National Park Service, Department of Health and Human Services, and more. In addition, RPCVs have successful careers in the nonprofit and private sectors. Interesting fact, the CEO and co-founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, was a Peace Corps volunteer in Eswatini in the early 80s, and the first Puerto Rican astronaut, Joe Acawa, served in the Dominican Republic. All right, so now I want to share some pictures from service that I actually hold very close to my heart. I lived in Ngulula village, Northern Province, and I served as a fish farming volunteer. So my primary goal was to promote fish farming alongside community leaders with the goal of increasing fish production and improving food security. Indeed, I worked closely with the Department of Fisheries, where we collaborated and supported local farmers by providing technical skills related to fish pond management, fish pond construction, harvesting techniques, fingerling, and fish feed production. Also, I had the opportunity to work with the local clinic, as I mentioned, and we implemented HIV/AIDS and malaria prevention projects. Actually, one of our biggest accomplishments was decreasing malaria cases by 12% from 2017 to 2018. In these pictures, you can see my wonderful host family, my counterparts, and I am incredibly thankful for their support and hospitality. I couldn't have done it without their help, indeed. They were my friends, my counterparts, my coaches, and my mentors during service. Their support was absolutely vital. And I'm happy to say that I'm still connected with a lot of them, and they always love to send me pictures and such, even though sometimes it's hard to get phone coverage and internet access, but they always love to send me pictures, especially when they sell fish. So this shows how the work that we do alongside community members is impactful throughout the years. All right, so now I'm gonna pass it over to Rachel Sato. Rachel, take it away.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and hi everyone. So great to be here with you all today. My name is Rachel Sato, and I'm a senior recruiter based out of the San Diego region. I am also a Return Peace Corps volunteer, and I served in the beautiful country of Nepal between 2015 to 2017 as a health education volunteer. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit more about, yes, yay, San Diego. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the Coverdell Fellowship, which Thomas spoke about a little bit as well with the Graduate Fellowship Program. And to provide some more context, I'm actually currently a graduate student here at American University in Washington, DC. Yes, so I'm doing part-time studies there, and I started really this journey after I returned from service. So we'll definitely be talking about that further. Next slide. So some of the myths regarding the Paul D. Coverdell Fellow Program. And again, as Thomas mentioned, it is it's a graduate fellowship, and we have over 200 partner programs nationwide. And this is a great benefit for people as they're transitioning from Peace Corps service. But I do want to highlight the myth first, which is, since Peace Corps volunteers do not receive a large salary, it will be very difficult to attend graduate school after service. The reality is that there are more than 100 graduate schools, and again, more than 200 programs, which you can apply to after you return from service for free, since a lot of those application fees are waived just for being a Return Peace Corps volunteer. You can also apply to more than one program, which is exactly what I did. I actually only applied to 2 schools, but having that application fee waived, about $50 to $70, was a huge, lift off with the burden, especially returning from service. And the really great thing about these Paul D. Coverdell programs is that they do provide anywhere from 25% to a full ride scholarship, and a huge price reduction for graduate studies. Another myth I also want to throw in there is that a lot of times people might think that you have to use this benefit right after you finish your service, which is not the case at all. It is a lifetime service. So I'm sorry, lifetime benefit. So at any point you're ready to pursue graduate school or even a PhD program, you can apply to any of these programs. Next slide, please, Thomas. Awesome, thank you so much. So these are a couple of photos from my service. And as I mentioned, during my time as a volunteer, I had no idea I was going to pursue graduate school. And I do want to highlight a little bit about kind of what that pathway was for me as far as going from Peace Corps into graduate studies. And before I became a volunteer with Peace Corps, I do recall looking at the benefits page and finding more about the Paul D. Coverdell program. I think I literally highlighted and bookmarked all the schools that they had a partnership with, thinking, okay, one day I will do grad school. But even prior to Peace Corps, I just didn't have a solid idea of what I wanted to study just yet. So it really wasn't until I served in Nepal, and within my primary assignment, being a health volunteer, my audiences and the people I worked with were just really varied, whether it be with the school children or the mothers groups or the farmers groups. It was a really dynamic audience to work with. And there were just so many different moments throughout my service, even with my secondary assignments of working with the local farmers and also just speaking with the women and hearing about their experiences and perspective, that just really started to formulate for myself how much I really want to study about conflict and peace studies and creating that dialogue between 2 different groups. And so a couple of things that I was able to get involved with throughout my time as a volunteer was actually mostly some of those secondary assignments. So I was part of the Inclusion and Diversity Committee during my time as a volunteer. And what that committee really focused on was being a support for the Peace Corps volunteers who were diverse and from minority groups who are currently serving in Nepal. And we also provided a lot of support and resource exchange for learning also about the Nepali diversity as well. So that really included learning about the gender dynamics, the gender discrimination that took place, as well as the caste issues and the caste discrimination. So again, there was just a whole nuance of topics to dive into, even in that capacity. And one of the experiences that I had through that committee was actually working with a local organization in Nepal that became such a great resource for future volunteers, because they learned, their organization was pretty much about providing awareness on caste issues. And in Nepal, there was like a hierarchical structure. So a lot of the caste, people who were from low caste, for example, were not able to have as much property, or they were not able to attend and be part of certain spaces. So again, there was just a lot of discrimination that was happening. And so this organization really taught the volunteers how to become better involved with them and how to work alongside some of those marginalized groups. So during that time, just really working with this organization really opened up my eyes on conflict and resolution, like how to build this capacity building for also future volunteers to benefit from, but also how to really learn about the Nepali people and what sort of conflict that was really taking place in some of these rural villages in Nepal. Additionally, I would have to give a huge shout out to the women in Nepal, because hands down, I learned so much from them as I was talking with them on a day-to-day basis. I do recall one person notably was the daughter-in-law that lived in my host family's house, and hearing her stories about being in an arranged marriage and leaving her family and living in this rural village with the in-laws, and just her day-to-day life. Like, I think that really sprung into action my interest in women's rights and women's issues as well. So I do want to give Indira a shout out. But tying this all back into Coverdell, so I did return in 2017, and I actually didn't apply until about 2019. So the lifetime benefit part really kicked in for me. I thought, okay, I'm not ready to apply to graduate school just yet, but when I'm ready, I'll do it. So definitely took a lot of pause and reflection on when is the good timing. And then there was the pandemic, so I did have to defer my spot for a little bit, but here I am now at American University. And it is wonderful because I feel like there has been so much real life experiences I was able to draw upon from my time as a volunteer in Nepal that I can apply to in classroom settings. And also just a network of possibilities of meeting with other Return Peace Corps volunteers who are also in that cohort of Coverdell Fellows has been a wonderful resource and a network as well. I think that's so far what I have, but I will be more than happy to answer any questions regarding the Coverdell program, and as well as just be a future contact for anyone who's also considering Peace Corps and looking into that transition to grad school. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm George McCaffrey, and it's nice to see you all. Could someone who's on screen give me a thumbs up if you can see my slide and you can read at the bottom? Great. I'm going to let you go ahead and read what I've done prior to the Peace Corps without saying it aloud. So as you can see, I did not join the Peace Corps when I was young. They are, next slide, please. Thomas, okay. The miss is that you serve directly out of college, and the reality is that Peace Corps volunteers come in all ages. I served with my wife as a married couple, so we were in a very, we were both 60 when we entered the Peace Corps, and we were married. So we were less than 1%, representing 1%, but it definitely has its advantages. So I would like to talk about serving later and I was a public school teacher for close to 30 years. And then after retiring, went into the Peace Corps and was able to use my background in education to train teachers and also work in a classroom in rural Thailand. Could you show the next picture, please? So this is a house in our village. We lived on a river, and there was 13 villages along the river. You can see that this house is up on stilts because of the river, and you can see that in front of the steps there's a protection to keep animals out. And Rachel just mentioned women in her country of service, and I'd like to. A big part of the Peace Corps push is helping women in development, and sometimes it's inadvertent things that you do that move along this. Well, our village was the central village, and it's where the market was. And I'm tall in America, but in Southeast Asia, I'm really tall. And women would come up to me in the market, and they'd say, I really stuck out, and they'd ask about my wife's health and how sick she was. And I'd say, she isn't sick. You know what the issue was? They'd never seen a man shopping before, right? And they said, so you do the shopping? I said, yeah, every day. And it was just one of those things that it was not my task to do, but perhaps in those little ways. And in secondary issues, in secondary projects, things come along that you see. The school system that I worked in had computers, but no one was using them. So my counterpart and I set up a closed circuit television station that broadcast out to the village, and also daily, half in English and half in Thai. And that was our secondary project besides training teachers. You know, I studied development as an undergraduate, and in the 1970s, I applied to go into the Peace Corps. I got accepted, and the day that I got my acceptance or offer to go into the Peace Corps, I think I had 5 days to decide. I went to a party that evening. It's common now, but 40 years ago, it wasn't so much. It was a foreign exchange student that I met at that party, who was my wife. And then 40 years later, when we retired, she said, you know, George, I owe you. You're interested in that development career. So that's how we postponed it. I wouldn't suggest waiting 4 decades, but it's certainly possible. One of the important skills that I think is really significant in the Peace Corps is a reality base to what development, international development, is like. And here's an example of someone that I met that I think was not based in reality. She'd never been in the Peace Corps. She was working on curriculum. She wrote curriculum for rural schools in Laos. I met her in the capital. She was on a UN contract. And she had never lived in a village and didn't speak the language, and she had never taught. And as being having worked 30 years as a teacher, I know what that curriculum was going to look like and how it wasn't reality based. If you come out of the Peace Corps, you have a real clear idea of the needs and the difficulties that you face. Thomas mentioned the non-competitive eligibility. My wife and I both thought that we were retired and we do the Peace Corps, one and done. And we heard about this only when we were in service. My wife now works as an immigration officer, helping people get their green cards and permanent residence. And I work for the Peace Corps. So, that NCE status is one of the most important things that you can get out of the Peace Corps. Next slide, please. This is the school where I trained teachers and taught, and as you can see, having students bow to their teachers is something that happens in Southeast Asia and not so much in the middle schools where I taught in the US. Next picture, please. This is my wife and I near the end of our service. And the next picture. Underneath all those baskets is a bicycle, and this vendor would come around through our village selling his baskets, of course, made by hand. And unlike where some other people serve, Thailand, where my wife and I served, is a middle income country. So there was paved roads, there was electricity. We had electricity most of the time. We had water into our little compound most of the time, although we still took bucket showers. All right, with that, I would like to turn it over to Kenyatta Spiller.
Hey, y'all, hey. It's so nice to see everybody's face, and I want to give applause and thank yous and gratitudes to all the senior recruiters who've gone before me. You all did amazing. I'm Kenyatta Spiller. I use pronouns she, her, and hers, and I was blessed to serve in the nations of Botswana and Zambia, Africa from 2015 to 2018. Next slide. Please, thank you. So the myth is that you have to have a foreign language or have previously studied abroad to be competitive in the application process. And I am living proof that that is not true. While having a foreign language and studying abroad does make you more competitive in the application process, it is not a requirement. When I applied to the Peace Corps, there was this saying that I really gravitated toward, which is that you think globally, but you act locally. Just a little background on me, I come from a military family. Both of my parents served in the United States Army. And so we were kind of, my sister and I were kind of groomed to come up, to go into the military potentially, but service was something that was constantly reiterated in my household. And so throughout my childhood, through college and high school, I was always involved in something. So I really found that saying of thinking globally and acting locally was something that really resonated with me. I was really involved on campus. I attended the Alabama State University and Savannah State University. So I'm a proud HBCU grad from two amazing institutions. And I was very involved on campus, whether it was in my department clubs, the NAACP, doing peer mentoring, going off campus and doing tutoring within the communities around our schools. I loved it. I really enjoyed giving back and giving my time to these different entities. And so I didn't realize it, but it was kind of laying the foundation for me to become a Peace Corps volunteer. Before joining the Peace Corps, because I actually joined after graduate school, I served as an AmeriCorps member. I did one term before graduate school and one term after. And it was an amazing opportunity for me to really figure out what direction I was going to go into after earning my BA. Initially, I thought I was going to go to medical school, and toward the end of college, I was like, this is not for me. So I used my time to kind of figure out, okay, which way am I going to redirect and pivot? I actually ended up learning about urban studies and planning, which is what I got my master's in. And AmeriCorps, especially my second term, really helped me to get practical experience in neighborhood revitalization and community development work. And it was during my time in my second term that I actually applied to the Peace Corps, and I was accepted to serve in the beautiful nation of Botswana. So next slide, please. Yeah, so in Botswana, I served as a community and economic development volunteer. The Peace Corps partnered me with two amazing organizations. One was a government office called the District AIDS Coordinating Office. And we actually oversaw all the HIV/AIDS programming throughout my entire district. And I lived in one of the largest villages in Botswana called Mole Polole. And so as a Peace Corps volunteer, I would go out into my community with my counterparts from the DAC office, and we would attend these different events and collect data so we could have a better understanding of who's being targeted with what messaging. Then we use that information to help us design our district AIDS budget. So I actually got to see how money came down from the Botswanan government to all these entities in my community that were doing outreach. The other entity I was partnered with was called Hope Worldwide Botswana. It was an international NGO that serviced orphan and vulnerable children impacted by HIV and AIDS. So the children had lost one or both parents due to the virus and had become child heads of household. And so Hope would build different partnerships in the community to help support those households. And as a Peace Corps volunteer, I would, of course, go out into the community and help support building those relationships. But another part of our outreach was community conversations. So I helped to create spaces where we could talk about some of the drivers of HIV and AIDS in the village, because I was fairly familiar with the data from the district office. So we would talk about things like gender-based violence, alcohol and substance abuse, mother-to-child transmission, and safe male circumcision, and of course safe sex, and do like condom demonstrations in public and in the smaller rural communities around Mole Polole. What's really great about the Peace Corps is, yes, you will have your primary role in one of the 6 sectors, but you also have the opportunity to bring your interests and your passions to your host community. I'm very passionate about gender equity work and women's empowerment, and I naturally gravitated toward the GLOW program. GLOW stands for Girls Leading Our World. And in essence, it's a youth empowerment program for adolescent girls and young women. In both of my communities, both in Botswana and Zambia, young women were almost 10 times more likely to contract HIV than their male counterparts. And so again, in collaboration with local influencers and stakeholders, I used the GLOW program to engage with young women in my community. GLOW was an amazing curriculum where, again, you can create those spaces to talk about concepts about self-esteem and goal setting and what it means to be a leader. For the young women who had already contracted the virus, we had positive living sessions where we reiterated the concept that although you do have this virus, it doesn't have you, that you can live a long, healthy, and productive life as long as you adhere to your ARVs and take care of yourself. Of all the things that I got to do as a Peace Corps volunteer, I hold my GLOW work closest to my heart. I say this all the time, and I will continue to say it. I have met some of the most beautiful, most resilient souls you will ever meet in this lifetime. I was so honored and so blessed to work with the young women in my communities, and I would go back and do it again. I wouldn't even have to think about it. My time in Botswana really laid a foundation for me to extend and go to Zambia and serve as a response volunteer. There, I trained teachers in comprehensive sexuality education. I know that is not a new concept here in the US, but in Zambia, even using English words for different parts of the anatomy in my community was considered very taboo. So you can imagine, as a Peace Corps volunteer showing up, some of my teachers were like, you are here to teach our children how to have sex. And so I had to really work at building relationships with people at my local education board, local NGOs, so we can really make sure that people understand what CSE, what comprehensive sexuality education is, why am I here, what am I doing? And by the end of my time in Chingola, Zambia, which is where I served, I trained almost 100 teachers in comprehensive sexuality education. And with the hopes that those teachers would go back to their schools and train other members of faculty and staff so that they can empower their students to make the best decisions when it comes to their sexual and reproductive health. It was some of the most challenging work I have ever done in my life, but again, it was so rewarding and so fulfilling. I absolutely loved it. So I'll quickly go through some of these pictures because I also want to save time for you all to ask us questions. The picture down at the bottom right, you'll see a bunch of ladies holding certificates. That was the first class of teachers that I ever trained in my catchment in Chingola. And I had gone to their school to watch them train other teachers in their schools. And I awarded them with their certificates in front of the rest of their faculty and staff. The left of that picture was my first GLOW camp. It seems like just yesterday we had over 50 girls, and I think it was about, off the top of my head, I think it was 7 Peace Corps volunteers, and we had them for an entire week, and it was absolutely amazing. That picture next to it is me teaching a class. I forget what I was teaching, but I'm sure it was awesome. Just above that, again, I served in Botswana, which shares a border with Zambia. And in between that is the lovely Victoria Falls. So I think in this picture, I'm actually standing on the Botswana side, looking at Victoria Falls and looking over at Zambia. I think that I just noticed the serendipity of that. I was serving in one country and looking at the country that I was about to go to. The picture in the middle is with my host family at my first Datu Baruba, which is a community celebration of the totem in my part of Botswana. To the far right, you'll see me holding the plate and kind of pointing at it. That is a Botswanan wedding. And I think I'm probably pointing at the seswa, which is pounded beef on my plate, which is one of my favorite meals in Botswana. And up at the very top, to the right of the Zambian flag, which is the green with the stripes down the side, that is my first guys leading our world camp. So we actually did a glow camp for young men in our community as well. So again, I'm going to stop talking because I can talk all day about Peace Corps and my amazing experience. Next slide, please. Again, we encourage you all to please scan that QR code to sign up for more information and get connected with your local recruiter. But right now, I'm going to turn the floor over to you all to share any kind of questions that you have for us. I'm going to check the chat.
I want to say thanks. Yes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kenyatta.
Go ahead.
It looks like we do have a couple questions in the chat, but since my mic works faster than everybody else's, you all keep using the phrase non-competitive eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
Could you unpack a little bit about what you are not competing for and what you are eligible for in that non-competitive eligibility?
Tomas, do you want to take that?
Yes, absolutely. And it's a really good question. So actually, you can find jobs on usajobs.gov, right? And we're going to be sharing that link. So when we talk about NCE, we talk about, certain jobs that like agencies have specifically for returned Peace Corps volunteers. So actually, when you are navigating USA Jobs, you can find an icon when you are like filtering jobs and such. And you just click on that one. It says, I think, NCE, AmeriCorps, and Peace Corps. And then you would see what jobs you can apply to as a returned Peace Corps volunteer. As I mentioned, it is a competitive process, so you're not going to be entitled to a job, right? You still have to submit documents, reference letters, and such. But actually, agencies have specific rosters with jobs for returned Peace Corps volunteers. Would someone like to add any additional detail?
Yeah, I'd like to throw in, just to make it real, there's a few people I know who have had masters in their subjects but could not get traction in their fields. And they went into the Peace Corps and came out. One woman, she's now tracking human trafficking for the Department of Labor. Who knew that job existed? She had a master's in social work. Another friend, she works as a compliance officer for the EPA. She had a master's in environmental science. And she told me that every job that she has had in her professional career has come because she was in the Peace Corps, and one thing led to another, and allowing her to do those different things. So there are between 2 and 3 million federal government jobs. Almost any position that you can think of, there is a federal government job doing it.
If I could add, this is something that's a benefit, and it means pretty much that you have a leg up with the general public that's applying. So you are non-competitive in the sense that you have an advantage. And a lot of agencies, because they're also staffed by RPCVs, so they have a tendency to give preference to RPCVs. That is all to say that you will have an advantage over a regular candidate off the street.
I like that. The RPCV Mafia looks out for each other. That's very nice. Kramer was wondering whether applicants have any say in where they're assigned or if their special skills like language or teaching experience are taken into account. Anyone like to jump in?
Nyada, do you want to take that? Sure, I'm happy to answer that. So, and I actually received another few messages in the chat about that. So let me just put a link in the chat here. You can, through the QR code here or connecting directly with your local recruiter, you can discuss individual opportunities because every Peace Corps position looks different from one another. There are many around the world. You'll be best suited to have that conversation with a recruiter. But you're able to apply to serve anywhere, or you can apply to a specific post. Based on the qualifications, both required and recommended, you can speak about the qualifications with your recruiter to find out which positions may be most applicable for your skills and experiences and interests. But you'll be best suited to make that decision when after speaking with a recruiter. There's also another question about how many times are you allowed to return home during service. So currently, due to COVID restrictions, volunteers that just returned are not currently allowed to leave their countries of service. But under as Thomas mentioned, those requirements are being continuously reevaluated. And before COVID, volunteers could travel to other countries using their 48 days of leave that are accrued like annual leave throughout the year. There's not typically outside of COVID, there's not a restriction on how many times you can return home or travel outside of the country. But once you are in country, your country staff will be able to give you the most information about the specific requirements in that country.
That's great, thank you. Madeline was wondering if the benefits discussed apply to all lengths of service.
Sure. Yes, and so yes, but the but here being that a few of the benefits are dependent on how long you serve, right? So the $10,000 relocation package that Thomas went over, that is accrued throughout service at approximately $300 some per month. So if you do end your service earlier than the 27 months, for a variety of reasons, that amount of money would be smaller than that full $10,000.
Thank you. One of the other questions that I get all the time is about some of those intangible traits about what makes a good Peace Corps volunteer, and perhaps especially for our advisors on the line, where folks may have their energy better redirected. Do you all have any insights into what makes somebody really well suited for Peace Corps service, and those things that if they're deal breakers, maybe they should find other good avenues?
I think the most important trait is someone who has a heart to serve. This is a commitment sometimes doesn't even fit it. It's big, and it does take a lot out of you personally, like getting your personal affairs together and, being away from family and friends and having access to we have access to so much stuff here. And you do have to kind of adjust that for your new life in your host community. So having a heart to serve, it's so funny, I'm going to use this phrase, someone who has some grit, who is, focused on the end goal and being of service and being a resource to their host community, and understanding like these host communities and countries have functioned long before Peace Corps, and they will function years and years and years after all of us are gone. And so you are coming into your Peace Corps community to work in collaboration with influencers and stakeholders to focus on a very specific sustainability project and work together. So someone who has that kind of mindset of teamwork and camaraderie. I will also say someone who is open and personable and curious about other cultures and communities and willing to learn. I cannot tell you the number of times I have embarrassed myself trying to speak Setswana in Botswana or Bimba in Zambia, but just being able to kind of laugh it off and get up the next day and try again. It's so someone who has resilience is the first thing that I wanted to say. It really takes a lot of resilience and persistence to do something like this. I could go on for forever, but grit and grace will take you far in the Peace Corps.
It is very tough. And, you know, when my wife and I went in, I worked all those decades in high poverty schools in the US, and I still got my ears pinned back by, you know, it's 115 degrees. You get 2 flat tires on your Peace Corps bike, and there's dogs, wild dogs circling you. I mean, everybody on this call has had something like that, and you just, there's just you there to deal with it. I went to a virtual panel discussion of 6 medical school students who are in various years of medical school, and they had all been Peace Corps volunteers. And one of the questions put before the panel was, what about the Peace Corps helped you get into medical school? And they all had the same answer, that when they walked into their interview for medical school, the professors, med school professors, looked up from their application and said, "Oh, you're the Peace Corps kid." They know it's tough. They know medical school's tough, and they know it's tough. And then the next question was, what about Peace Corps prepared you for medical school? And they said, the other students in medical school think medical school is tough.
If I could add one more thing to what George and Kenyatta shared, I think one of the myths is like a lot of people assume that they need international experience or study abroad, you know, to become a successful Peace Corps volunteer. And during my years working as a recruiter, I always love those questions because I tell people that is not an indicator at all of how successful you are as a Peace Corps volunteer, because you could have a whole wide range of traveling and, you know, integrating into different communities, but really the big key piece is to be a learner in this process as well, and also coming in without, you know, biases or previous experience in that sense, because you're going to learn a whole new set of skills, especially as you're living in these communities, that you might be able to draw upon from your previous travel experience, but not at all an indicator. And I think what Kenyatta mentioned about being adaptable and you know, having flexibility are really, and that heart for service is so important. So just want to throw that in there.
Thank you. Landon was wondering if there are countries that are, or certain areas that are in higher demand for volunteers than others?
Sure, I can take this and then move on to that next question as well. There definitely are countries that are more popular and receive more applications. I think a general rule of thumb is if you've heard of it, it probably receives more. If you'd go on vacation there, it probably receives more applications. So obviously that does make an application for that country more competitive, depending on how many spots they may have open that year. But again, working with your local recruiter will make you as competitive as possible in submitting your application, so that if you are applying for one of those more competitive posts, that you make sure that you have both the required and recommended qualifications, so that your application will be as competitive as possible. And again, but that flexibility that everyone has talked about starts before you ever even set foot in the country. We recommend everyone to be as flexible as possible, apply to serve where needed most, because there are a lot of unseen steps in this process, a lot of people reviewing your application, speaking with you, and those people are really well trained, working really hard to make sure that your skills and experiences are put to the best use with the community that you'll be serving. And I think going into it, remembering that you're serving the community and it's not just about where you want to end up. And I always say, wherever you end up will be your new favorite country of the world. Like, I had never set foot in Morocco before I served there, but now I can't imagine my life without Morocco. I had studied Spanish. I had applied to serve in Peace Corps in Latin America. I was recommended to serve in Nicaragua, and then I was invited for Morocco. It was a tough thing to accept for a few minutes, but it was the best decision I ever made. And then the next point, and kind of related back to those tough scenarios that we were talking about, is how dangerous is the Peace Corps? Are volunteers ever in unsafe situations? So I do want to emphasize that safety and security of volunteers is Peace Corps' #1 priority, far above and beyond anything else that Peace Corps is working on. When you land in country, you do 3 months of pre-service training where you are thoroughly trained on all different types of situations that could arise in that country and that could arise anywhere globally. And Peace Corps will ensure that you do not set foot in your local community until you are well trained on how to react to a wide variety of circumstances and scenarios that you might not have thought about before going to that country. Does anyone want to add anything else to that?
I can add something real quick. I know that in the first 3 months of training, which starts in country, there is a whole segment of safety and security trainings that the Peace Corps staff will be, going through and walking the volunteers through that as well. And all posts do have a safety and security officer who is on duty 24/7. And what that means is they have that phone in case any emergency comes up. They also provide that streamline of information to volunteers if there's ever, like a landslide or road blockage or any protests happening in larger cities. Like, that duty officer was really the person that tied that information in to be distributed to all volunteers as well. So definitely, as Anthony mentioned, safety and security is so important and definitely a huge priority for Peace Corps.
So I have 1.5 more questions. Obviously, we're talking about myths and realities, so I'll skip the obvious one and invite Anthony or someone to put the how do you apply and what are the steps link in the chat. And I'll go with one last myth and reality. George mentioned being the tall white guy and how everybody knew, therefore, that he was sort of the American. But I'm curious for Thomas and Rachel and Kenyatta, can you talk a little bit about your experience not fitting that preconceived, very antiquated idea of what an American, quote, looks like, and how that shaped your experience and what you would recommend to other students?
I will just jump in here. Serving as a Black woman on the continent of Africa, there were some blessings to it, and personally there were blessings to it, and then on the professional side there were some challenges. A lot of times I would just blend in with everybody else, and people would automatically assume wherever I was that I was Botswanan. If I was in Botswana, I was Zambian. If I was in Zambia, I used my 48 vacation days to see as much of sub-Saharan Africa as I possibly could. So a lot of times when I traveled to other places, as long as I didn't speak, people would assume that I was from there. So a benefit to that is you just kind of blend in. So I can remember when we first got to Botswana and we were walking through a market, and I was with some white volunteers, and when people were just flocking, like, Lakoa, 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 Lakoa. Lakoa is foreigner, 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 foreigner. And I kind of got pushed to the side and just kind of, because again, people would just assume. So I noticed very early on that I was going to be able to navigate, especially social settings, a lot different than my white counterparts. I can remember going to site visits with other volunteers and, again, people kind of flocking to them, but for me, kind of being able to kind of go and see behind the scenes and talk to people and hear their stories, and not the pretty stories, like the ones that are painful and, things that people aren't so willing to share up front when you first meet someone. So I was appreciative of people feeling more comfortable with me. I have a lot of funny stories too. riding on public transportation and people speaking to me in different languages, and I respond back in English and people being like, oh, you know. So that was one side to it. But then on the professional side, people were constantly questioning, who am I? Who are you? Why are you here? Where's your husband? Where are your children? Like, you're not an American, and constantly having to explain, yes, I am. I'm a Peace Corps volunteer. I'm here. This is why I'm here. I'm here to work with you. And a lot of times because of my age and my visible identities, professionally, people would kind of try to push me off to the side. But then that resilience kind of kicked in for me. It was like, look, I have committed 27 months of my life to be here. And if you're not gonna let me in through the front door, I will climb in through the window, but I'm here to work with you and be a part of this. And I think that showing up every single day, people were like, okay, she's serious about this. And we are going to collaborate in some kind of way. So there were challenging moments. So I've definitely had my days where I was like, what am I doing? But I found that trying to turn those moments into teachable moments with people. I also found that sometimes you can't have a teachable moment and people are kind of stuck in their ways. And sometimes you have to leave people stuck in their ways and just embody and be an example of who you are and why you are there. There were really challenging moments, but I think as long as you stay focused on the end goal and why you're doing Peace Corps and what it is that you're there to achieve, you can navigate around those types of situations. And I think as you move through service, you'll notice those moments where you can have those conversations with people who are open to them. But I decided what was best for me is to reserve that energy for people who were open to those conversations and try to meet them where they are.
Thank you. Rachel or Thomas, anything you wanted to share before we wrap it up?
I'd be happy to share, but Thomas, did you want to chime in as well?
You can go first.
Okay, I'll be real quick because I know we're short on time, but yeah, I think being a Japanese American woman in Nepal was really an interesting experience, and I definitely had a lot of conversations surrounding my identity and you know, as Kenyatta shared too, about being perceived as non-American because I did look a lot like the people that I was working with. And Nepal was really just amazing in that sense because they had such a big diverse group of people, whether they were Indo-Aryan featured people or the Mongolian, Tibetan featured Nepali people. So the group of people that I found that I was with in my village were definitely a lot of just a mix of, you know, both of those groups. So I do recall some moments when I blended in so well and they just, you know, the Tibetan featured Nepali people kind of took me in as their own, and that created an opening for me as well to actually work with them and to enter into spaces that they invited me into, whether it be to the weddings or to the temples. And it was an interesting like aspect of in-group, out-group mentality that I was able to also kind of tap into as a volunteer. But there were definitely also moments when I did feel tired for always having to explain to people, especially in the bigger cities. I think in my village, like the people kind of knew who I was, but it was always having to explain my identity whenever I did travel in Nepal. But I was used to that too. I think just growing up in Japan and always being perceived as another, just another ethnicity. So but yes, it's definitely a big theme for I think a lot of people. And I really appreciate you bringing this up, Carmen, because I think it's a great discussion to have. So over to you, Thomas.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say that your words are so, so powerful and your stories resonate with me in different ways. And I do want to say that I think it's really important to be humble and be willing to listen and connect with people and build relationships. Zambians would definitely question my nationality, my ethnicity. Sometimes they would ask very interesting questions like, oh, Thomas, why do you have a weird accent? Where are you from? You can't be American. People don't speak Spanish in the US. Who are you? What are you doing here, right? So I definitely had to practice a lot of patience because I would have to repeat my story several times every day. But I think having that patience allowed me to build meaningful connections with people, right? And of course, you know, speaking the local language as well, right? I think that was a very beautiful way to connect with people, and it was a great way to reach across the canyon. So I'm just gonna say that. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks to all of you. What a wonderful note to end on, as such a great opportunity for our students and our advisors to deepen those relationships and build those bridges across so many different barriers. I want to thank all of our attendees for being here and being part of this conversation. And I absolutely want to thank all of our amazing recruiters who seem so open to all of you. So come on in, ask your questions, get to know them, get to know the Peace Corps, and then see all of the many different opportunities and springboards it can provide into lots of different career opportunities. Medical school, APSIA schools, recruiting, all kinds of different possibilities. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for being here. We look forward to seeing you at future APSIA webinars. And as was mentioned, it will be available by the end of today on APSIA's YouTube page. So feel free to share with others who may have missed this great conversation. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you. Take care.